Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1169. Woohoo, we're getting up there. What was I going to say? I totally forgot. Tonight's topic is all about, people have been asking me, have been private messaging me since we started doing this month, because this month is, it's October, it is Family History Month. So people have been private messaging me a lot of things like what type of, when we've gone through all the information that we ourselves know, what questions do we then ask other family members in order to find out what they know? So we actually have a list, and I will tell you right now, I did not create this list. No, this actually comes from familyhistorydaily.com, and it's a really cool list, and I didn't go and change any of it because it has really great questions in there. But we're going to talk about some of the questions that are in there, and then you can always come up with your own questions as well, especially if you have a family history story that you want more information on. You can always say, hey, I heard this rumor in the family that... So anyway, and we also have made this questionnaire available for you. In the description down below, just go to Before Dirt Nap Family, without the, beforedirtnapfamily.com, and you can get, and we will send you a copy of this so you don't have to go hunting high and low for it. And you will have your own list of the questions. But, what type of questions do you ask? When you start researching, you've written down everything you know, everything that you can recall. In fact, I just finished a 4-day workshop on writing, just writing, period, whether it's your memoirs, whether it's a nonfiction book, whether it's a fiction book, short stories, poems, that sort of stuff. It was a really, really great workshop. And one of the exercises they had us do was called 100 Moments. And and I did this, and I think I ended up with like 110. They only had room for 100, but I just kept writing. That's just what I do. And some people didn't get to 100, and some people got well over 100, got even more than I did, which is perfectly fine. But what it was is just going, just sitting back, relaxing, putting a timer on for about 20 to 30 minutes, and writing down 100 moments in your life. And that will also help you jog your memory on other details in your life, things that have happened, places you've lived, people you've met, that sort of stuff. Oh, I just thought of another one. Hang on, I just got to write this down. Sue Pollard. Okay, that was telephone. Sue Pollard telephone. Okay, so just go through, just sit down with pen and paper, or you can type it if you like, but it actually works a lot better if you use pen and paper. But when you use, just use pen and paper and write down 100 moments that just pop into your head. Like the one I just wrote down was Sue Pollard telephone. And what that moment was is that when I was in the Royal New Zealand Air Force, we actually, they actually asked, we're based in Wellington, and every year we held this telethon, which went for 48 hours, 24 hours, went for a weekend. I think it was either 48 or 72 hours. I don't remember which. Might have even been 24 hours. I don't remember. I'd have to go back and have a look. But we held this telethon one year, and one of the celebrities that we had was a British actress called Sue Pollard, and she was in this program called Heidi High. And Heidi High was this British summer camp, and whenever a staff member called out Heidi High, you had to reply Heidi Ho. And she always wanted to be a yellow coat. Now, the yellow coat is kind of like your cruise director. They're the entertainment staff. But she was a maid, and she has got a gorgeous singing voice. It is a stunning singing voice. But in the show, she didn't sing properly. She didn't sing with her gorgeous singing voice. She sang with her slightly off-key voice. But her character's name was Peggy, and she just so wanted to be a yellow coat. And so it was a 30-minute comedy that was on once a week, and it was just this beautiful show about it was absolutely hilarious about the yellow coats who look down their noses at everybody because we're yellow coats, we're the cream of the crop of the entertainment. And then you had the maid Peggy, who was always trying. And when you get the bum in some comedies, you have the person who is always trying and everything always gets screwed up. That was her character. And so, she was in New Zealand for the telethon. And at the end, after we'd finished cleaning up, we were in charge of the catering and stuff. And at one point, we were told just to drop everything, to go down into the TV studio. And we just were part of the great big long conga line that they did. And we went dancing in front of the TV cameras and all that sort of stuff in this big, huge conga line. And so afterwards, when we had finished cleaning up and we were all sitting around the tables, one of our security guards, he was this Greek guy called Jack. He was hilarious. He was one of the security guards from the base, and he had mentioned to me that he wanted to meet Sue Pollard. And so the woman who was in charge of our whole area and stuff and finding the volunteers and everything, she comes out and she says to everybody, she says, "You guys were fabulous this weekend. Is there anything we can do for you?" I said, "Yes, Jack here would like to meet Sue Pollard, please." And Jack, he was probably in his 50s or something. He just goes bright red. And he's like, no. I said, "Yeah." I said, "Jack here wants to meet you." She says, "I'll be right back." And so she comes back with Sue Pollard, and she was just absolutely wonderful. And as soon as, we said, "Well, Jack," and so I said to her, "Well, Jack here wanted to meet you." And she goes, "Jack," she says, come up here. And so she gets Jack up there and finds out that he's Greek. And she goes, "Oh, I love drinking that stuff that you have. What's it called?" And he goes, "Ouzo." And she goes, "Yes, that's the stuff." And then they start doing this Greek dance together. Poor Jack didn't know what to do or anything else, but it was a fabulous weekend. That same weekend, I got to meet the guy from Dynasty who played Alexis Carrington's wife. There was a couple of singers in there as well. It was a really cool weekend. We didn't actually cater to the celebrities, but the celebrities came in to say hi anyway, because they thought the catering was from us, but it was actually done with a private company. So we just fed the masses. We fed all the crew, the volunteers, that sort of thing. They had these bands they had to wear, and but yeah, it was a fun weekend. So that's something that you can put into. Think of things like that. Was it a vacation you took one time? Were you in a shop and you got this and you happened to get this amazing deal? What else did I have in there? I remember my birthday when I got my bike, my very first bike. It was my 9th birthday, and my parents and all week we've been looking at, they had locked up the garden shed, and the garden shed was basically our playhouse. It was where we got to store our toys and stuff, and Dad had built a big blackboard in there, and it was just part of our, it was our playhouse. And then we had he built a gym thing off the thing with 2 pieces of wood that came out into a triangle. There was a pole that we could climb up on, and quite often we would walk across the beams onto the roof of the shed. I don't know how my mother felt about that one. I don't remember. And we had a rope swing off it, off the frame. And that was our plaything. And before my birthday, it was locked up. We were not allowed to go in it. So, of course, we're taking turns at peering through the key, because you had those old-fashioned keyholes you could peer through. And we're looking through this keyhole trying to figure out what's in. Look, it looks like a pedal. I'm getting a bike. Oh, my gosh, I'm getting a bike for my birthday. Getting all excited about this bike. Well, when the day came, they gave me this packet. They gave me this little package. And I'm like, this isn't my bike. But in the spirit of being birthday and being grateful, I opened it up, and there was the key to the shed. Myself and my 2 younger brothers, we go running out to the shed. We put the key in. We unlock the shed. We throw open the door. There's nothing in there. Nothing. Like, no. And so we go running back into the house, because we're like, we checked around the back of the shed, and then we go running back into the house because we couldn't find this bike. And there was my bike sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor. In the middle of the kitchen. So, just things like that, just memories. What memories can you come up with just a moment where you write down something like Sue Pollard telethon or 9th birthday bike, and you just write down these little keywords that will prompt you later on to go back and tell the full story. And maybe there's some information in there that you can end up putting into your family tree, into your timeline and your lifeline, for your dash. And so there's things like that. But when you've run out of all your own stuff, Now you got to figure out what everybody else knows so you can start putting the puzzle pieces together for your tree. So then you go to your living relatives and you ask them, what do they remember? And be nice about it, set up times for it. And there could be time just in general conversation it comes out. Always make sure you have a recorder with you, a digital recorder that you can just quick one time. This one here, I just flip the slide switch up, hit the record button, and now I'm recording. It's that quick, that simple. And I actually have a pouch I wear around my neck when I'm driving, so it sits about here. And in that pouch, I have this recorder sitting. So I can sit there and I can talk to the recorder because I have, being in an RV, we have a very big space. Oh, I need to charge it up. It's running out of battery power. Very good. This one actually charges up on USBs. So I'm just going to plug the USB in here and let it charge away. Please wait. Yep, now it's charging. Cool. Oh, hello. My dog wants to play tug now. It's not time yet, Zeph. So remind yourself of all these little moments. See if you can come up with a list of 100. If you do 50 and that's all you can do, that's fine. It's okay. There's no right or wrong answers to any of this. So once you have your stuff done, and there's going to be stuff that people are going to say that's going to jog your memory. So whenever you're visiting, always make sure you've got pen and paper handy and you have a recorder handy, because if you remember a detail, if it jogs your memory about about something else that happened, one of those moments, you can quickly just write it down. But then there's also some questions you can ask, and that's where the questionnaire comes in. Like, you ask the person, what's your full name? What is your full birth name as it is on your certificate? Because what is interesting is that you may find out that you've known this person here to be Tom their entire life, thinking that their name is Thomas, and it could be something completely different, but they just like the name Tom, or they somehow got nicknamed as Tom, and they've been Tom ever since, and yet their name could be John. Go figure. Some of these names I just don't understand. And ask them what their birth date is, and do they have a copy of their birth certificate, so you can see these things. You can take a picture of it so you have the information that's on the birth certificate, so you can go and pull that information off and put it in the tree. Other thing, so there's a lot of different questions in there, like where were you born? So did your parents name you after anyone? That's a great question. Now, my middle name is Mary, and I'm actually named after my paternal grandmother's mother, because she was Mary as well. And so that's where I get the Mary from. But what delighted my great-grandmother, and this is one story that, this is one story that my mum told me about my great-grandmother. When she first heard my name was Helen Mary, she got super excited because she thought I was named after her and her sister. Nobody in the family knew that she had a sister called Helen. And it wasn't until years later when we were researching, I said, I would call my mum up one day and I said, I found Helen. I found Granny's sister Helen. She goes, you did? I said, yes. She was actually Editha Helena. She's like, really? I said, yeah. And she was known as Nellie. Editha Helena, and everybody called her Nellie. She goes, that was Auntie Nellie? I said, yeah. Because nobody knew what her real name was, because everybody just called her Auntie Nellie. And she's like, oh my gosh. So you never know. This is why you always ask, what was the name that you were born with? What is the name on your birth certificate? Was there any christening or baptismal records, so we can see what name you were baptized with or christened with? Questions like that. Did you have any nicknames when you were a child? When and where were you born? Where did your birth take place? Were you actually in a hospital? Were you in a car on a freeway? Were you out in the middle of the woods? Most people assume that everybody was born in a hospital or at home. That doesn't always happen. They could have been on their way. They may have made it to the, oh my gosh, there's this one video. I think it's on YouTube, because I watched it years ago. This is before TikTok and Instagram, and I think it was even before Facebook. But there was a video on YouTube, and this woman is in the front passenger seat of this beautiful, brand spanking new pickup truck, giving birth, because she was so far along, they couldn't take her out of the truck to put her on the gurney to take her inside. They couldn't even put her on the gurney for the delivery in the park by the emergency bay doors, and where the ambulances come in. And so she finally gives birth. She's holding the baby there and she goes to show it to her husband. All her husband can do is complain about the mess of his brand new truck, which he had had for like 2 or 3 days. She just gets nervous and goes, poof, and knocked him out. I love that video. That kid is going to have an amazing birth story to tell years later. So just think of things, where were you born? Were you born at home? Were you born out in the paddock by the tractor? Were you born in the hay in the barn? Were you born on the side of the road? Where were you born? Were you actually born in a hospital, or were you born at home or somewhere else? There's all sorts of places. You can give birth at just about anywhere. Where did you give birth? What was your mother's full name, date of birth, and where was she born? The same with the father's information as well. Do you know about your maternal grandparents' names and dates of birth and where they were born? So remember, you're probably talking to parents or grandparents at this point. So now you're asking about their parents, which are your great-grandparents if it's grandparents, and your second great-grandparents. So you're starting to ask back further in the line. Remember, start with what you know. Where did your grandparents live? What memories do you have of visiting your grandparents? I have great memories of visiting my grandparents. I have lots of great memories about that, about visiting grandparents and everything else. And my grandmother, on my paternal grandmother, she taught me how to crack 2 eggs at once when you're baking. And, I just had little hands at the time. I can still crack 2 eggs at once just by hanging onto the eggs, cracking them on the side of the bowl and separating the shells. And most of the time it works and there's no shell falls into the eggs. Other times I'm in there fishing out the shell that fell in from the eggshell. I'm fishing out pieces of shell. But that's one thing I remember about with my grandmother is that we were in the kitchen and she taught me how to do that. And she had to learn how to do that because when she was when she was in the service during World War II, she was part of the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, which and that was the women's version of the Air Force. It later became part of the Royal New Zealand Air Force, but not till after World War II. So she was known as a WAAF, Women's Auxiliary Air Force, and her job was a cook. And so that was one of the things they had to learn real quick, is because you're getting up in the morning, you're making breakfast. She worked in the mess and was making breakfast for everybody. Of course, they don't cook individual things. No, they're cooking masses of stuff. So at that point, it was like, you got to crack those eggs as quickly as possible. And that's how she learned to crack 2 eggs at once and get them in there and toss the shells. And so she passed that handy little tip on to her grandchildren that wanted to learn. And my grandmother could grow African violets like nobody I have ever seen before. She had these shelves out on her front porch, and she could get Africans to grow like crazy, and they would flower year round. And she said she never did anything special, but my mother could never get them to work. She goes, I don't know why these aren't as good as your grandmother's ones, and they don't flower. And it probably came down to the soil and the climate. Was my thinking years later. I never inherited any green thumbs from my grandparents or from my parents. I kill plants. Do not give me plants as a gift because they will die. So that's something, it's another little memory thing that you can use. Another really cool thing is if you have set up the time to do the interview with the person that you're doing it with, is have them walk you around the house and point out family heirlooms. Where did they come from? Who, how did they end up in the family, and where did they come from? I have a cross stitch, a tapestry that was done by my great grandfather. How did I end up with it? It got taken out of the frame, folded up, and given to me. But it was done by my grandfather's father. And it's this knight on the back of a horse in complete armor, and he's got his jousting stick out, and it's all folded up very carefully and everything else. So when I get a permanent place, like my log cabin, I can then take it out and get it framed, and then I'll be able to hang it back up again. But for shipping purposes, it got taken out of the frame, and I was able to bring it back to the US with me that way. So there's that. That has family history. I also have a barometer, and that's one that measures the air pressure and things. And I ended up writing on the back who it belonged to, but I can't remember right now. But it's this beautiful, I think it's made of oak, and it's got all those brass fittings and everything. It's just absolutely gorgeous, and I love having that thing up. It doesn't really work, but it's a really cool piece. So, there's things like this. My grandparents at their house, they had this silver salad service thing, the bits that you use, to dish up the salad. These are these long silver things. They had long handles. They had the little grippy things. They had the little spoon things on the end, the spoon fork things on the end. And that came from the manor house in England. And the manor house is a manor house that used to be in my dad's paternal side of the family. And and at some point they moved from that manor house, and this was a piece of silver. These were 2 silver salad servers that were somehow ended up with my grandparents. I don't know how they got it, but they did. I don't know. It's after 8, and she doesn't have her TREATs. Yes, she's looking for her treats. Like, that's after 8 o'clock right now. I should have put them out before I got on here. So look through some of the memorabilia that they have, some of the heirlooms that they have. My grandmother was a collector of badges. And I'm not talking just regular badges. I'm talking military badges, with the insignias. When you look at the military and you see, like, they have the different ones that designate what trade they are in within the service and that sort of thing. She had those sorts of things. And she would write letters to different organizations around the world, and tell them that she was a badge collector, and could she have, and she was interested, and she'd write letters. She'd write a lot of letters, and she was looking for a full set of badges from this particular division within this particular branch of the military, or police service, or fire department, but mainly it was military that she went to. And I remember going on trips with her to badge shows on weekends and stuff when we stayed with her, and seeing what was around and all of that. And a lot of the replies that she got said, "You are the only female badge collector we have ever heard of, so here's a full set. We don't normally do this, but because you're the only female badge collector we've ever heard of, here you go." And she had hundreds of badges, and she would have like these felt pads that she would mount them on and then put them into frames. And some of the frames she made, and some of them were old picture frames that she took the backing out and just mounted it all up. She was a very good woodworker, my grandmother. So there's little things like that you remember at times with people. Another way you can jog their memory too is pull out photo albums. Do they have photo albums, scrapbooks? Do they have a box of mementos? Do they have scrapbooks that have stuff in them? I have a scrapbook that has every birthday card I received from when I was born. It even has my birth announcement in there, the little tag thing that was on the end of my crib in the hospital, to the congratulations on the new baby books, all the way through to, I think it goes to age 12. But I still have, I'm turning 56 this year. I still have every single birthday card I have ever received. Unless somebody's come behind me and thrown them out, I still have every single birthday card I have ever received. I don't throw out birthday cards because my mother made this scrapbook for the first 12 years of my life. And I love going back through that. And it's interesting to see how cards have changed over time. And there was times I'd look at this and go, "Well, Mom, who's this? Who's this person?" And she'd sit and tell me, "Oh, that was a neighbor that we had, or that was your best friend. That was the family your best friend from growing up. Do you remember when we lived here and you would go over to this house and did it?" And I go, "Yeah, well, that was the people that lived in that house." So she would jog my memory and things of that way. "Do you remember when?" And tell the story. So do you have anything like that? Do the people you're interviewing have anything like that? Have a scrapbook that's full of newspaper articles or certificates? I have a binder that has archival safe, I think it's archival safe sleeves in it, that has every school report I ever got. And for my very first job interview when I was applying for the Air Force, I had to go and do an interview with the recruiting officer. So I didn't really have anything that went on my CV, which is curriculum vitae or your resume. We call them CVs in New Zealand. And so I took along my CV, but I also took along my school records as well. And he even went back to the very first one that I ever got and read through it, and then would stop every now and again. He was looking for the consistency. He was looking for the consistency through growing up, because I was only 16 when I applied for the Air Force, 16 and a half into application. And this was a few months later, so I hadn't yet turned 17. And so he was going back through my school reports to see what the consistency that was there was. Were the comments the same throughout the years? Did anything change? Were there any drastic changes or anything like that? Even when I switched schools, and I went to 9 different schools, so I've got school reports from 9 different schools, which horrified my mother when I pointed out the fact that I'd been to 9 different schools, because she didn't believe me until I rattled them all off, and she said, "Oh, what horrible parents you had." So ask questions. Do they have a collection of do they have a collection of what did we find at my mother-in-law's place? Sometimes you'll find copies of receipts of things that they have purchased over the years. It could be stuff that they've bought at an auction. It could be antiques they have purchased, and they've kept all the receipts and everything else as well. Tell me about this piece. Why did you buy this piece? Did you buy this piece? Were you given this piece? There's a lot of stuff that you can use as memory joggers when asking questions. The 100 questions just gives you some places to start. Can you describe your childhood homes? I could, without, not my first or my second home, but not the first or second house I ever lived in. The first house I was only in, I think, for the first 6 months. Actually, first 3 houses, first 3 places I lived. The house, I don't remember the first house that I ever lived in. I was only there for the first 6 months of my life. The next house, we were there till I was, how long were we there in that one? I can't remember, but I did this one year for my parents' 30th wedding anniversary, is I got a photograph of every house they had lived in over the years and had them up, and I had written on there the years that they lived there. So 20 odd years ago, I could tell you. But the first 3 houses that I lived in, I couldn't tell you about them. But from then on, I could probably draw out floor plans. Would not be to scale. I could draw out floor plans of every house I've lived in since then. I don't know. Just random things that you remember. It's crazy. So, can you describe the house? Can you describe the neighborhoods? Things like that. There's a lot of stuff around that's a memory jogger. And when you're interviewing somebody for the information that they know, it's going to jog your own memory too. And it may not be the exact same thing, but it could be something like it. Sorry, the dog really wants to play. But it could be something that is similar to an experience that you've had that you can then turn around and go and later on write up. So you just write down that little moment, circle it so that you go back to it later on, and then you can do that. But when you're setting up for interviews, make sure that you do it that you plan this ahead of time. You don't just suddenly turn up and say, "Hey, Grandma, I want to ask you a lot of questions." Yeah, no. They're going to shut down. But if it comes out in general conversation when you're visiting, that's fine. But you can set up like a formal interview time. Say, "Hey, I just want to come and ask you questions about your childhood and things like that, just for the family history. Just ask you some questions about your childhood, where you grew up, that sort of thing, how you met Granddad, how you knew he was the one." You can get a lot of fun stuff out of grandparents that they filter. Their filter's kind of a little damaged a little later on in life. There's been some very interesting stories that I have heard from my mother-in-law. And you can tell that had her filter been working 100%, we would not have heard those stories. So she would have taken them to her grave. But it's interesting to see the older they get, the more they let slip, or the more free they feel to talk. They don't have to worry about the filters. So you can get some very amusing stories that way. And the other cool part is that with grandparents, they will not only share stories of their childhood, they will also share stories of your parent, of their children's. They'll share stories of their children. And if you get them onto that, you'll get some great stories that way as well. And you may even get stories about your great-grandparents. You never know if your great-grandparents are around. Again, they'll tell you stories about their childhood, about their parents, and about their own children, your grandparents. So you can get some interesting stories about from other generations. Just take the time, set up a time, make it comfortable for them. And if you're going to try not to video, I learned this one at one of my classes that I did, is that it's better to do an audio recording rather than a video recording, because with a video recording, they're kind of very conscious of the video. Unless you've got it like off in the background where they can't see it or something like that, where it's out of their point of view and you can still sort of like see, maybe videotaping them from the back, or having somebody standing behind with the camera. So if you pull out a photo album, you've got the video camera can come over and have a look, and so you can see the photographs that are being talked about, and have that recorded, but always have the audio recording going. And if you can get one that has an external microphone that you can plug in and use a lavalier mic, where you put that little mic on the side of them there. Hi, Mama. My mum's texting me. Then you can interview them with that as well. You get a very clear recording. The clearer the recording, and always have a backup. Always have 2 recording devices going, because then if something happens to the first one, you still have the second one as a backup. So make the interview a comfortable time. Make it a good time for them, not for you. And just turn up and basically when you're interviewing, just have a conversation with them. They'll say things. You say, hey, tell me more about, Uncle John's time that he was in hospital. And they mention Uncle John was in hospital. Oh, I didn't know Uncle John was in hospital. Tell me more about that. And you may have your list of questions there. They may get turfed out the window, because one thing that I like when I do it, and you'll see this with the guests that we have on the podcast here, is I like to have a conversation. I don't want to make it a formal, okay, what was your birth name? Where were you born? When were you born? That's just too like formal. Tell me what you remember about your childhood. And then from what the stories they tell, oh, you went and saw that particular sporting event. Tell me more about that. What was that like? So you'll get questions off. Listen, you were given 2 of these for a reason, and only 1 of these for a reason. Use these, and you will hear them say words or mention somebody or something, and just say, hey, I didn't know about that. Tell me more about that. What can you tell me about that time? Oh, you went, I was at when Queen Elizabeth had her 25th Jubilee. She was traveling around the world and everything else. She came to the city that I was born in, and we happened to be living in the little town, just a 20-minute drive from there. And us Girl Guides got dressed in our Girl Guide uniforms and were taken over there, and we got to sit on the side of the road. And when the Queen's procession came along, we got to stand up and wave at the Queen. What was that like? And you hear a grandparent talking about something like that, and you can turn around and say, well, tell me more about that. What was that like? What was it like being in the Rose Parade? If they were in the Rose Parade, what was it like being in the Rose Parade? How many miles did that's like a 5-mile track or something, doesn't it? Ask them questions to validate the thing. Isn't that like 5 miles you guys had to walk? How did you do that, twirling that baton that whole way? How was it you were able to stay in step with your marching band that whole way? Did you have to play music the whole 5 miles? That must have been breathtaking. That must have worn you out or made you breathless or something, depending on what instrument they were playing. Find questions and listen to what they are saying, and ask questions. Ask them to clarify a point. Oh, you mentioned John. Who's John? John may be a brother that they had that you didn't know about, that passed away before you were born, and nobody's ever mentioned him ever since then. Maybe he's the black sheep of the family. You get to find out family secrets that way. So, just have fun with it. Make it relaxing. Just have a conversation with people, and just work the questions in as you're going along. The questions will automatically flow. That's what I find, is that, some people have to sit there and check off the questions. That's fine. If that's your style, that's fine. For me, I'd rather have a conversation with people and just listen to what they are saying and ask questions based on what it is that they've said. Like if they're telling a story, I might write down, who's John? Or where did that take place? Oh, they went to Disneyland. They went to Disneyland on opening day. I wonder what that was like. You never know. Oh, they were in World War II. Where did they serve? What military branch of the military were they in? Questions like that. So listen to what is being said take notes, because the reason that you take notes is it backs up your audio recordings that you have, but it means too that if it jogs something in your memory, you can write it down so that you can go back to that memory later on and write out more about it. So that's it for today. I am out of here. I got a dog that wants some treats. Oh, there she is. She's up there. She wants her treats. My mum's just texted me, so I got to go answer her text as well. So have a super fantastic sparkling evening. I hope that helps with the questions. And remember, if you would like a copy of the 100 questions, then please go to beforedirtnapfamily.com. The link is in the description down below, and click on that link, and we will email you the list of questions there. So have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Hey, konara.